Issues that matter to us. Experts who can expand our understanding. This is Left, Right, and Center.
Welcome to program Left, Right, and Center. Today we have Chief of Calgary Police Services with us in the studios, and we'll be discussing with him about public safety task force motion and about the violence occurring in the city and many other issues which have caught our attention. Chief, very warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much, Amanjot. Nice to be here.
Thank you, sir. So Calgary has seen 80 shootings last year, and multiple shootings have occurred in first month of this year also. And still we hear that Calgary is, a safe place to live. How can we believe this as people say that sounds of gunfire isn't stopping?
Yeah, I get that. So I think the number was 89 shootings for 2019.
Yeah.
And I think we had 8 in 2020, January.
Yeah.
And so all of those, it's important to know that all of those shootings are not sort of gang related or in public spaces. Some of those are actually occurring in other contexts. So not all of those are what you would think about in terms of the gang violence. But yeah, it does seem to be a contradiction in terms. But what we see in a lot of those cases is that the shootings that are occurring are between people who know one another and who have ongoing conflicts. Mm-hmm. So I think, people can be comforted in Calgary that if you are just a regular citizen that's going about your business, you tend not to ever see anything like this because, it occurs, like I say, between groups that are, that have some sort of a score to settle or some sort of a conflict going on between them.
Okay. So City Council gave a green light to the creation of a public safety task force very recently, and the Police Commission and Calgary Police, they were also open to this idea. Can you please tell us about the reasons why CPS is open to it and explain how the role of a task force would differ from existing programs?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So the notice of motion around the public safety task force that was passed really talks about how we could engage the community and how we could have more discussions with our partners about what gaps there might be. So I think, as your listeners know, the CPS is well engaged in the issues of the violence going on in the city, but certainly I think the community has been quite rightfully concerned about that and wants to be engaged in the dialogue. So I think it's a good idea for us to be having the discussions with the community so that they can understand what we're doing, but also I think so that we make sure we have all the up-to-date connections and can understand what's going on. Okay. And to look, I think the elements of a good, successful strategy for dealing with something like that are equal parts enforcement, equal parts consequences, and equal parts prevention. Yeah. And so, and I would say that probably, the discussions around the task force will be, what are the areas, aside from what the police are doing, are there any other gaps where we could actually improve the programming or bring some other supports in place that actually might help to prevent these things? Because certainly by the time somebody's been injured or killed, it's too late. So I think this is more around, the task force is going to be more around where are the gaps and focusing on the preventative side.
Okay. And community engagement, that has never been redundant in any case. What's the level of community support which police gets from people during investigations, and that also particularly in the Northeast quadrant?
Yeah, so good question. So this is something that happens around the city, not just in the Northeast, but certainly for your listeners here, a lot of folks would be more concerned or not more concerned maybe, but more impacted by what happens in the Northeast. I would say that the level of engagement and the level of cooperation we get from the community at large is very good. What we find, believe it or not, is that the folks that are involved in these things, that are involved in the shootings, amazingly tend not to cooperate. So if you can imagine when, let's say, a shooting happens and somebody gets taken and dropped off at the hospital, the police will get there. And unfortunately, the folks that have been injured won't give any information about what's happened. So it puts us in a very difficult position to try to figure out what's going on. And sadly, I think when people start getting involved in the tit for tat violence, sometimes the next shooting is planned in the emergency room while the victim of this one is getting tended to. And so people are actually finding, ways that are outside of the norm, the normal system for dealing with these conflicts. And so what we want to do is make sure we have those strong relationships with the community so that they feel comfortable working with the police and actually feel that, they can actually make sure that the system actually works. But by and large, the community, the larger community is very cooperative, very concerned about this. It's just that subgroup of people that are involved in this type of, risky lifestyles and the violence, they tend not to cooperate at all.
And we have heard that a new firearms investigation team is being developed by CPS. What's the idea behind it, and what will be the tasks assigned to that team?
Yeah, so that's actually being worked up right now. But the idea behind that team is to make sure that we're doing the full workup and getting as much intelligence and evidence as we can from the guns that we seize. So we seize hundreds of guns every year, not all handguns. In fact, the majority that we seize are actually long rifles, believe it or not.
Okay.
But certainly the guns that are involved in the types of urban violence, the shootings that we see in the Northeast, we want to make sure that we're actually getting all the evidence and all the information we can, and as quickly as we can, and feeding that back into the intelligence system to the investigators so that they might actually use that to help solve the next one. You can imagine that in the neighborhoods in the city, most people are peaceful. Most people are not involved in this. And so in the number of shootings last year that we had, there would have been individuals who were involved in more than one of those, and firearms were involved in more than one of those. So it's really important if we can establish linkages between incidents and shootings, and then when we can solve those things, we can lay more charges as well. And so that was a bit of a gap for us just because of capacity to be able to process those guns quickly enough. The other thing that team will do for us as well is those serial numbers from those guns that are seized will be actually fed into the databases for some of our U.S. law enforcement partners, which will actually help us to determine whether or not those guns are being locally sourced. Most of them are illegal. I would say actually in the urban violence shootings, all of them are illegal. But it's good to know where they came from. If they came from, a break and enter in Calgary, or if they came from being smuggled from the U.S. That's another piece that we'll be able to get that we didn't always have.
Okay. And talking about this team, will new officers will be recruited for this team, or officers from current ranks will continue in this unit?
Yes, current ranks. So what'll happen with this is very much an investigative position. So it wouldn't be brand new people coming in for this. These would be folks who would have some experience and would be moved into those duties.
Okay. And Calgary Police has expanded its roadside alcohol screening checks, and now every driver, if I'm not wrong, if asked, is bound to give a breath sample.
That's true.
What prompted CPS to take lead on this, and are all police forces in the country doing the same?
Yeah, so most are. So this is actually federal legislation. So this was changes to the criminal code that came about at around the time that cannabis was legalized. So it was in October of 2018 that the laws changed. So we started out actually getting into it with our traffic people right off the bat so that we could sort of perfect the process around that. But this is a law. It's a little bit controversial, as you know.
Yeah.
But this is a law that actually in Canada, it's come to us in 2018, but it's been something that's actually been in place in a lot of other countries for many years. And it's a bit of a game changer, to be honest with you. In countries where they've actually enacted mandatory alcohol screening previously, the research shows that actually impaired driving has gone down significantly. Yeah. So this is something that's being implemented by police agencies across Canada. So we're one, but everybody, the laws apply to everybody right across the country. So it's not as though, Edmonton is, but Calgary isn't. Everybody is doing this. Yeah, sorry.
And as far as the controversy is concerned, what's your take on that?
Well, here's the thing. The fact that it works is very significant to me. There'll be people on both sides of the argument that'll argue this out as cases go through the courts. The case law around impaired driving is a hotly contested issue in the courts anyway. Yeah. So the case law around it is always sort of changing. The case law around the impaired driving legislation we had was fairly settled. And so this is going to be a big change. So what you're going to see is probably a lot of court cases. There will be decisions appealed. And so in terms of how the law gets shaped in the courts, that'll happen as we go forward. But I think in the meantime, we know that this is a tactic that works. And it's actually, practically speaking, if you were to get pulled over at the roadside, it's really a minimal intrusion. The officer will come up. You don't have to get out of your car. It's so simple that if you can breathe, you can blow. Yeah. And so basically you give your sample. It takes a very short period of time. You get the results and you're on your way. Mm-hmm. So one thing I should say too, though, is what hasn't changed. I think some people believe that the police now have the power just to pull you over anytime to take this sample. And that's not true. The police still need grounds to pull you over for some reason. Okay. So, speeding or not stopping at a stop sign or whatever. Mm-hmm. But if they do pull you over, they will be able to get the sample from you. And again, it's not something that takes a lot of time or you're sitting at the roadside. But it is something that we've seen that, so far, I think, since the law came into effect, we've done about 16,000 tests like this. Okay. And out of that, we've laid about 150 charges, I think, of impaired driving. Okay. So that's actually, no impaired driving is good, mm-hmm. but you can see that, it does produce results. Yeah. And I think just knowing that, you can be pulled over, anybody who might be tempted to drink and drive should really think twice about doing that.
Yeah. And we know that you joined CPS in the mid of June last year.
Yes.
What new initiatives have been started by CPS since then?
Well, I'll tell you, there's been a lot of things. There was some low-hanging fruit there around some concerns that people had. I think early on, things like the tenure policy. Mm-hmm. We had a pursuit policy that was outstanding. We've had quite a bit of change around our executive management team. Okay. And we're just about to actually do some fairly substantial changes to the structure of mm-hmm. CPS. Mm-hmm. So it seems like, June feels like a long time ago, mm-hmm. but when I sit back, it feels like it was yesterday almost.
Calgary Police annually conducts its half marathon, and I'm sure you would like to share details of this year's event with us also.
Yeah, so that's coming up. So April 26th is actually going to be the 40th anniversary of this marathon. So it's put on by a bunch of our officers volunteering, mm-hmm. as well as volunteers from within the community. So it's actually a great event. It happens again at April 26th. There's numerous distances to run. There's 5 kilometers, there's a 10 kilometer, and then there's a half marathon. Okay. And this is supported by the Calgary Police Foundation. And the tie-in to that is that those Calgary Police Foundation is the foundation that actually funds a lot of the youth prevention and sort of gang-related programs in the city. So I think it's a great cause. People should come out and support it, and feel free to come and join us on the 26th of April.
That's good.
Yes.
I also need to join it. And in closing, what would you like to say, sir?
I think that's it. For the most part, it's always nice to come in, Amanjot, and see you and the folks here at Red FM and talk to your listeners. I just want to reiterate that, like I say, we've had a very busy first part of the year, but again, Calgary is a safe city, and certainly we're here working with the community in the Northeast, and you can expect that we'll continue to do that going forward.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're very welcome.
We'd like to see you soon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Red FM.